mute and unmute button. Kindly also leave your microphone muted during presentations. Time for questions will be provided after Stephanie speaks and then after I speak, at which time you can unmute your microphone to ask questions, or you can just type your questions into the chat at the, you can find the function for that at the bottom of your screen as well. And before I run through the topics we'll be covering this evening, I'll begin with a brief land acknowledgement. So the Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues acknowledges that we and our community leagues are located on Treaty 6 territory and respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant communities. With that said, I'll now review the topics we'll be covering this evening before turning it over to our presenter, Stephanie, at MCCAC to chat about the Alberta Municipal Solar Program, or AMSP for short. After hearing from Stephanie, I'll take over again and go over other funding sources that can be combined with AMSP. Some of these will be no-brainers for community league volunteers, while others may be less realistic or less well-known to some leagues, but most of those other ones have been used in the past by leagues, so I'll just run through them as well. After reviewing the currently available funding opportunities for community league solar projects, I'll provide a few sample examples of grant stacking pathways that might work for different leagues. Keep in mind that these are just examples and that each league should work to chart its own path in terms of how to stack grants and when they want to apply for each. It'll really depend on your own sort of particular circumstance. And then after that, I'll briefly touch on some other things to keep in mind while planning and executing a solar project, and then quickly review some other funding opportunities for individual homeowners for you to consider and to pass on to your membership. The city had just asked me to share a few of their programs as well tonight. Yeah, and I'll now turn it over to Stephanie to review MCCAC's Alberta Municipal Solar Program. Welcome, Stephanie. And we'll just transition slides here.
Super, thanks, Mike. Let me just swap things over here. All right. Sorry, it's just going to take me a second to get my presentation up. Okay. So hopefully you're all seeing this now. I'm going to try and go into full screen mode. There it is. Okay, so thanks so much for having me tonight, and I'm really excited to sort of walk you through. I don't know if this is going to be familiar for anyone, or hopefully it's new information, but I work at the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre, and we are home to the Alberta Municipal Solar Program, which we'll walk through tonight. I'll start off just with a little bit of information about the Action Centre in case you're not familiar with us. So we were established in 2009 to provide municipalities in particular with funding, technical assistance, and education on climate change, mostly to help them reduce their emissions. So typically in the past, we have offered a whole suite of programs, but they're usually focused on energy efficiency and renewable energy, with some other things thrown in there as well. So in the past, we also offered there were some community leagues that took advantage of one of our programs called TAME or TAME Plus, where they were able to do energy efficiency retrofits on their buildings. And at the moment, what we have available to community leagues is the Alberta Municipal Solar Program. So to date, the center has been funded by various grants from the Government of Alberta, and it's led by the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association in collaboration with the Rural Municipalities of Alberta and the Government of Alberta. So we're sort of a joint venture, if you will, in delivering these programs. Just this past year, we won an Emerald Award that we're quite proud of, being recognized as a strong and positive provincial and environmental leader, trusted implementer and project manager that encourages healthy collaboration, and for our service as well to all of our the AUMA and RMA members, but also the community leagues and other community organizations that participate in our programs. We also have a program available right now for school authorities. So that was one of our big pieces of news this past year. To run a little bit through, what we've done to date in the 10 plus years that we've been around. We've had 352 individual participants complete 651 projects through our programs. for a total of $3.9 million in annual savings for the participants. From a solar specific standpoint, we've helped install 19.9 megawatts of solar to date, which we're pretty excited about. We're rounding that corner on 20. We're almost there. and all of the energy efficiency and renewable energy projects that we've helped fund see a total of 24,146 tons of CO2 equivalent of annual emissions reduced. So we're, some of the projects are pretty small, but altogether everything makes a difference. So jumping in, and this might be familiar for some of you, but I wanted to sort of start at the beginning for anyone that's brand new to solar. So to give you just a sense, and what we'll be focusing on tonight in particular are microgeneration systems. So that's, you'll sort of hear that a term come in quite a bit. But solar PV just generally is a renewable energy that converts energy from the sun into electricity. So that's, it at its base. It's the various pieces that you see. Often you'll hear things referred to as solar panels. Technically, it's a module, that single piece. And within it are a number of different solar cells. So usually modules are broken down into 60 or 72 individual cells that are all connected together electrically. Each module gets connected to each other, and then they all run to an inverter. And then when all of those modules are together in a system, it's what we call a solar array. So typically in a microgeneration system, they power the building that they're connected to first. So they'd be connected into the electrical panel of the building that they're on, or the one that they're beside. They power that load first, and then anything extra that can't be used by that load immediately gets exported to the electricity grid. So in a way, the electricity grid's kind of acting like a battery. It means that you can be grid tied and you don't need to have a battery system. So when you're producing extra, it goes onto the grid. And when you're not producing enough solar to meet your needs within the building, you pull from the grid. So it works really, really well in that sense. And then modules can be mounted in a whole bunch of different places. With community leagues in particular, we usually see them roof mounted, but there's one, Riverdale in Edmonton did a solar gazebo a few years ago. So you can do ground mounted systems as well. There are building integrated modules that are becoming more popular, where you can put them on walls. You can, instead of siding, you can put solar modules in. So there's lots of different technologies available. Currently, the most widespread and economically viable systems are grid tied. And like I was saying, they kind of use the grid as their battery. So worldwide, just a quick little stat, more people are currently employed in the solar industry than the coal industry, which is pretty neat. I don't think that's well, it might be the case in Alberta now. We're starting to do the coal phase out. So we'll see. Solar is definitely getting bigger. But, why does this make sense from a community league standpoint? Ultimately, there's a number of different options. The first two that kind of jump out automatically are the reduction in costs and the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So anytime you're offsetting electricity that you would otherwise be consuming from the grid, you're saving money because you're not paying for that electricity, you're producing your own. And then because in Alberta, our electricity grid, our primary sources of centralized electricity production are coal and natural gas, we actually have quite a high carbon footprint, our electricity grid does. And so anytime we can produce renewable energy on site and use it on site, it just means that we're reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and our own environmental footprint. So that's a great addition. It also helps to create learning opportunities. So it's an opportunity for a community league to have a showcase piece that they can use to educate the community around them and encourage residential participation of this type of technology as well. And in Edmonton in particular, because the city has a solar rebate, it's a good opportunity to sort of start those conversations. The technology itself is very proven as well. So it's fully commercialized and scalable. It's been around since the 1950s and it's really well established. The modules are getting cheaper and cheaper, and the technology is definitely continuing to advance, but the base technology that we started with in the 50s, it's not that different now. We're just getting more efficient in how we actually capture that energy. So proven track record, it's not something that's brand new. So that's sort of that piece. And then Alberta in and of itself is a really great place to install solar. So if you look at the map there that's on the right, it sort of gives you a general sense of what we call solar insolation. So It's the amount of sun that a location gets over the course of a year. And when you compare it to Germany, which is known around the world as a solar leader, we have far better resource than Germany does. Alberta and Saskatchewan in particular are sort of our solar hotspots in Canada. And so it actually makes a lot of sense here to install solar. When you're looking at things like, you know, Okotoks compared to Miami, Florida, Okotoks actually has a greater solar energy resource between July and October than Miami does. Now the winter months are a little bit different here because we have the shorter days, but realistically we're despite us being 4,000 kilometers further north, in the summer, we have way better resource than Florida does. And we're starting to see people begin to take advantage of that. I don't know if you've been watching the news, but there are utility scale solar projects going in all across the south of Alberta right now. We have an energy only market. There are international players can come in and invest in our electricity market, and by installing systems, and they've realized that we've got a great resource here, and they're taking advantage of that. So we might as well take advantage of it as well. And it works great even in the winter. I mean, a lot of times we get the question of, well, what about with the snow, and what about with the short days? And yes, you are going to produce less electricity in the winter. That's just the nature of living in a more northern climate. But realistically, and I think Mike might mention this a bit later too, but the NATE has actually done some great studies with their test array, showing that the snow on solar arrays actually only reduces your annual production by about 3 to 4% typically. So it really doesn't reduce your production by that amount, by very much, because you actually typically don't produce as much in the winter anyway, and you can actually still produce electricity even through snow. That some of that light does get through. So it's it does make sense here to install solar. So let's dig into the Alberta Municipal Solar Program. So this is a rebate program to encourage municipalities and community organizations to install solar PV on their own buildings or land to help them reduce their operating costs and their environmental impact. Uptake has been really strong and steady since this program opened. We had round 1 start in 2016, round 2, which is what we're currently in, started in 2018. And there's only 1 year left to apply. So this program will close officially on April 30th of 2022, or before that if it's fully subscribed. And because it's quite popular, I wouldn't be surprised to see it fully subscribed before then, but it should be open for another little while. So to get into what's eligible under the program, so projects that are installed on municipally owned buildings or land in an urban, rural municipalities, and they can also be in buildings that are owned by a community organization like a community league, provided that building is on municipally owned land. So there are a bunch of community leagues within Edmonton that have taken advantage of this, that fit right into that category. The systems need to be new and paid for by the participating municipality or community organization. They have to be grid tied and compliant with the microgeneration regulation, greater than 2 kilowatts in size, designed and installed by a qualified installer, so they can't be self-installed. And then there needs to be a piece that engages the public about the project. And we're pretty flexible on that. With the community leagues, that's usually a pretty easy piece to satisfy, because often the leagues they have lots of outreach to their community anyway. So, hosting an event where you're talking about solar and explaining to people how it works and the advantages of it. The great thing about most solar arrays as well is now they actually connect directly through the internet to a portal, so an online portal that you have access to as well. So if there's a monitor in your league hall or something like that, or you could even share a public link to all of your residents where they can actually go on and see the real-time production of the system. So there's really great educational opportunities that come with arrays like this as well. So the program is available to all municipalities in Alberta. So they just have to be defined under the Municipal Government Act as a municipality, which Edmonton is. So we already know that all of the community leagues in Edmonton should be eligible. And then for community related organizations specifically, the municipality does have to be a co-signer on the funding agreement. And technically the funds are delivered to the municipality and then they're dispersed to the community organization from there. So they would go to the City of Edmonton and then get sent out to the community leagues after that. So the City of Edmonton does need to be involved, and I would recommend, if you are thinking about doing an array through this program and applying, make sure you're in touch with the city as soon as you can be, just to let them know, with your, with the person you deal with at the city, just to let them know you're planning on doing this. They've done a lot of them before. It should be a pretty familiar program to them. But and then yeah, I think we covered just about everything else. So, the qualified installers as well, just to touch base on that, do need to be members of either Solar Alberta or the Canadian Renewable Energy Association. I would say most installers worth their salt are members of one or the other, or sometimes both. So, but it's just something you want to check when you're talking to installers. It's also worth letting them know you plan to apply for this. A lot of them are very familiar with the program, and they'll actually help you through the application process as well. So it's good to get their help with that. Just to clarify what's not eligible, so projects installed on residences, commercial buildings, schools, hospitals, provincially or federally owned facilities, projects that have received funding from other provincial solar PV incentive programs. So that would include the Energy Savings for Business program. I know Mike's going to talk about this a little bit later, but if you were eligible for that program, you can't stack R2 grants. Projects that are self-designed or installed, projects that are on temporary structures, which I think is, it's not usually an issue with community leagues, but something to consider. You couldn't say put it on, a temporary garden shed or something like that. It does need to be a permanent structure, or on if it's a ground mount, it's obviously going to be fairly permanent. Off-grid projects are not eligible, and then solar thermal projects are also not eligible. If you want to dig more into the details, our program guidebook is available on our website as well, and it has a whole comprehensive list of eligible expenses that can be included as part of your project expenses as well. And we're always available by email and phone to answer any questions that you might have. So to get into the funding piece of it, the program operates on a first come, first served basis. So as soon as we have a funding agreement come in that's fully complete, and somebody signs, if we have an application that comes in and we sign a funding agreement, once that funding agreement's signed, we lock in those funds. So it's, just to clarify, it's not sort of a typical grant program in the sense that it's not merit-based. So as long as you're eligible and we have funding available, and you get your application in before the funding runs out, then you would receive funding. We're not going through and judging the merit of your project. And we can confirm that eligibility really early in the process, so with good certainty whether you will expect to receive AMSP funding or not. The program is funded, the funding is provided on a $1 per watt of installed capacity basis with a sliding scale. So the sliding scale you see here, it's not to penalize larger projects, it's just to account for the economies of scale that are seen with larger installations and provide an equitable incentive to all of the system sizes. So smaller projects tend to have a higher $1 per watt cost, and so they get a slightly higher rebate, whereas larger systems have a lower $1 per watt cost, so they get a lower rebate. Municipalities can access up to a maximum of $1.5 million in incentives. To clarify, community-related projects like community leagues don't count towards the municipal cap. So you don't need to be worried about your project eating into the City of Edmonton's cap and maybe them having an issue with you applying for that reason. We keep them totally separate. So, and the other piece of it as well, and this is our next slide, is there is a first-time applicant bonus that's available as well, and community leagues are eligible for that. So that's, you can kind of see, and the one other piece that's important to remember is that there's a cap of 30% of eligible expenses on the rebate. So you'll either get the $1 per watt amount or 30% of cost. So if you hit that 30% cap before you reach the $1 per watt amount, then it's whichever is lower of the two. So the first time applicant bonus that I mentioned, this was introduced in round 2 of the program to try and incentivize uptake from new municipalities and new community organizations, just to help lower the risk and encourage them to take on the technology and hopefully see the benefits from that. So Community organizations, as I said, are eligible for the first time applicant bonus, even if the municipality they're within has already participated in AMSP. So at that point, the municipality wouldn't be eligible, but any new community organization that hasn't already participated still gets the first time applicant bonus. So you get an additional 25 cents per watt on top of that base rebate. And it doesn't count to, it's applied in addition to the 30% funding cap. And it's capped at a total of $250,000 per project. I would be very surprised if any community league installed a project large enough to get to that $250,000 cap. So you should be fine there. To give you a sense of who's participated already, so we have funded 14 different community league solar PV projects for a total of 278 kilowatts installed on community leagues in Edmonton. Just under our program. There may be others that have done it without our program. And I think EFCL has modules as well that were done through a different program. So the annual GHG reductions that are coming off of our systems, at least, are the equivalent to taking 55 internal combustion engine passenger vehicles off the road for each year the systems are in operation. So that's that 180 tons of CO2 equivalents in annual GHG reductions. Average project cost across those 14 systems was almost $49,000, so $48,840. And the average system size installed was 20 kilowatts. So that's averaging anything out. And combined, the arrays, these 14 arrays produce enough electricity each year to power 40 average Alberta homes. So that's coming in at assuming that everyone's using about 7,200 kilowatt hours per year. I know I use quite a bit less than that. So depending on your home, again, it's the average. But so to give you a sense and, foster a healthy sense of competition. So you can have a look at the list of leagues that have already participated. We'd love to get this list to 20 before, we end the program. That would be my dream. And we'd love to talk to you if you're interested. We're happy to share any information we can. Also, I would say feel free to reach out to these leagues if you're curious about how they did it and what their experience was like. We'd love to get a few more of you in before we run out of money. So this gives you a sense, though, of when systems were installed, what the array size was. You can see, it's anything from 7.8 kilowatts, which is it's almost like a typical residential size at Queen Alexandra that went in 2017, all the way up to, I think the biggest one on there is the Blue Quill system, which was 53 kilowatts. So there's some pretty significant systems there. Oh, and Windsor Park was another small one, so 5.58. So it really depends on your load. When you contact a solar installer, they'll have a look at your electricity bills for, well, probably not the past year, because 2020 was a terrible example of usage, but they would probably ask you for 2019. They'll have a look at how much electricity you use over the course of a year. And then they'll have a look at your facility and how much roof space you've got. And they'll come up with, they can give you a quote for what system size would be able to offset 100% of your electricity use. And then you can go from there as to, what are your limitations? Is it your budget? Is it your roof size? Is it your load? You can start having those conversations and figure out what would work best for you. So to give you a couple of concrete examples and dig into a few more of these details, and also to show you how we calculate our rebate. So this is Laurier Heights Community League. Oh, sorry. And I'm realizing that I don't know it. Oh, sorry. I'm going to check the participants list just very quickly because I can't see it. Oh, no, I'm good. Okay, we're good. Phew. I was worried that there was somebody in the waiting room. So Laurier Heights Community League installed a system in 2020. So this is one of the more recent ones. And they put in a 40.8 kilowatt system. They have that beautiful roof that's perfect, just about perfectly south facing. That was, I think it's a newer community league, and it was almost perfectly designed to house a solar array.
It had renovated recently and done an expansion, I think, a few years ago.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. So they put in their system for just over $79,000. And so they fit into that rebate category of the 75 cents per watt rebate category. And I would say that most arrays are probably going to fit within that band, unless they're below 10 kilowatts, which there's not very many that we've seen that have been below that size. So if we go just by the dollar per watt amount, we would see that as, you know, you take your 75 cents per watt, multiply it by 40,800 watts, you get your $30,600. So that would be the initial estimate that we would do without knowing how much the system costs. But then we look at their total costs being $79,090, multiply that by 30%, and then we'd actually come out with 21,627. So that means that they've hit that cap of 30% of eligible costs for their base rebate. So what their base rebate would be that 30%. And then we would add on to it the first time applicant bonus. So based on their system size, they would get an additional 25 cents per watt, which is that $10,200. And so their total rebate ended up being $31,827, which is actually about 40% of what their total project cost was. So you can, especially with the first time applicant bonus, it's pretty safe if you're doing your ballpark figures to assume that you're going to be able to see about 40% covered by AMSP.
Sorry, can you run through that again quickly, Steph? So the 30% bonus, or 30% max, that's a maximum, but it doesn't apply to the first time bonus, is that right? Or
correct. So the first time applicant bonus is on top of that, of what we call our base rebate, which is why you can get more than 30% of your project covered. So
yeah, I was panicking here because I was going, no, in my presentation, I thought you could get more, but all right.
Yeah, exactly. So we sort of do the two separate calculations where we figure out what the dollar per watt rebate would be. We figure out what 30% would be. Whichever is the lower of those two is our base rebate. And then we add on top of that the 25 cent per watt first time applicant bonus. And so for this system, and this is just based on a 10 cents per kilowatt hour average over the course of the lifetime of the system, we would assume that we would estimate that they would see about just under $4,000 per year in energy savings typically, which puts their simple payback with our rebate at about 12 years. So it reduces it by a decent amount.
And we should say here too that they also used their CLIP grant to reduce that down to more like 7 years. And I believe they could have gone even further. They just didn't apply for the max CLIP. So
super. Yeah, exactly. So again, that shows you the advantage too of if you're stacking this with other funding, the more funding you can get, the shorter that payback period is going to be, which is great. So, all right, looking at the next one. There we go, is Inglewood. So this one went in a couple of years ago in 2019, and this is just down the street from me. I get to look at it very often, which is great. So they did a slightly smaller system. It's about half the size of the Laurier Heights one. They installed a 16.2 kilowatt system for a total of $40,830 as their project cost. And so again, they're in that 75% per watt rebate category. So if we do those same calculations, we would estimate their rebate based on their project size at $12,123.75. And then if we do that 30% of eligible costs, the 30% is actually higher than the dollar per watt rebate. And so we just go with the dollar per watt rebate in this case, and then add the first time applicant bonus to that. And so their total funding was $16,165. So that's the amount that they received in a rebate from us. And their annual savings we would expect them to be just under $2,000. So that puts them at a simple payback of 13 years. So without any other funding. And I'm not sure if they accessed other funding or not, but
they did.
They did. Perfect. So they would have a payback of even shorter than that. So
just sorry to interrupt again, Steph, just to throw it out there, after speaking with Justin at Inglewood in 2020, which is a lower consumption year because of COVID, over the course of the year, the league was paid $630 from the utility and didn't pay like in overall. They made money.
That's super. So at the end of the year, they actually got a check.
Yeah, and maybe it rolls over to the next year. I don't know, but how that works. But he also said that when he ran his numbers, he said only about half of that was probably due to consumption being down because of COVID. So even in a normal year, they probably would have gotten paid at the end of the year.
That's great. Yeah, and I should have mentioned as well that both of those systems were designed to offset 100% of annual consumption. So they were sized specifically to produce as much electricity over the course of the year as what they would consume over the course of the year. Now, keeping in mind that most of that's going to be produced in your summer months. So in the summer, they're going to be exporting like crazy to the grid. And then in the winter, they'll still be pulling off of the grid. But when you balance it out over the course of the year, they come out net positive, which is great. So how to participate. This is sort of the high level overview. Ideally, what we'd love you to do is read the entire guidebook cover to cover to start with, and have a look at any of our resources that we have. Again, if you have questions or if you need a hand understanding something that's in there, we are always available for questions. And then we'd encourage you to get a number of quotes. We recommend it 2 to 3. 3 is always better. From installers, just to make sure that what you're being offered is right for you, and that you're getting a fair deal, basically, right? Just doing your due diligence to make sure you're getting a good price and a good system design. You select the installer you want to go with. Well, you can submit an expression of interest first. Sorry, I should get my ducks in a row here. So you'd go onto our website and fill out the expression of interest form. Now, the expression of interest is a totally non-committal step. It just gets the project on our radar. So if you already have a couple of quotes from installers and you have a general sense of what kind of project you want to do, get that expression of interest in as soon as you can to us. We'll set up a call with you and walk you through the really detailed process of, how to get to application, and just confirm with you too at that point that your project is eligible. So that it sort of reduces your risk right off the top. If you have a sense, but you don't really want to pull the trigger until you know for sure that you're going to be able to access our funding, get that EOI in. We'll have a look at what you've got. We can confirm with you at that point that, yes, it looks like it's eligible. You shouldn't be concerned. You should be able to access funding. And then you would sign a contract with your installer to actually do the project. Once that contract is signed and they have submitted the microgeneration notice to EPCOR in this case, and you've got a few of the other design documents that you need for the array, then you can actually submit a full application to us. So you submit that application with all of the bits that go along with it. And again, your installer that you've hired should be able to help you with the vast majority of that application process. Submit the application to us. We'll have a look, make sure everything looks good. If it does, we'll send over a funding agreement first to the city. So in this case, we would send the funding agreement to the city of Edmonton. They'll sign it. They'll send it back to us. We send it to the community league. You sign it, send it back to us. We sign it. And then once everyone is signed, that locks in the funding for a period of 8 months. And so that gives you 8 full months to actually complete the project. So then you get your installer going and they install the project. Once it's done, you send in a whole suite of completion documents to us with pictures and proof of exactly what was installed. And then we would send you a rebate. And then you get to start saving money from your electricity that you're producing, which is great. So jumping into a few other funding sources, and Mike's going to cover a bunch of this, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but there's the CLIP funding from the City of Edmonton, CFIP funding from the Government of Alberta, the Co-op Community Spaces Program. Now, this program deadline did just pass this year, so you could potentially apply again next year for this if you're looking at delaying your project by a little bit. There's also the solar rate with retailers, and it's not funding. And are you going to talk about this at all, Mike, or do you want me to?
I hadn't planned to get into this, so you can go ahead, and we even just had a question, I think, about this.
Oh, super. Okay, great. Yeah, so although it's not a funding source, it might be, and I don't know if maybe Inglewood, it's very possible that they're on this rate. Yeah, okay, then that would make sense.
They're with ACE, yeah.
Perfect. So that makes sense why they're actually net positive at the end of their year. So
actually, you know what, they might be switching. I don't know. I'm not sure. Some leagues are, though. Some leagues are different.
Yeah, sure. Fair enough. And we've seen a few municipalities do this as well. So because Alberta is an energy only market, we have the freedom to sign up to purchase our electricity from any electricity retailer we want to. And so there are some retailers that offer what they call a solar rate, or you can be part of a solar club. And all that means is that for part of the year, they allow you to switch your electricity rate to a higher rate. So in the summer, when you would typically be overproducing and exporting to the grid, you switch your electricity rate to, I think typically it's about 23 cents per kilowatt hour is the rate right now that most of them are offering. And it does mean that when you're consuming electricity in the evenings, you are paying that same rate. But when you're overproducing in the daytime, you're getting paid that same rate from your retailer. And so it allows you just to reduce the payback on your system because you're getting more, it just increases the value of the electricity you're exporting basically. And then once you get back into the fall and the days start to get shorter and you're producing a little bit less, you just call them up, you switch back to their standard base rate, which is, you know, between 6 and 8 cents a kilowatt hour usually, and you do that for the whole winter. So it is worth noting, and we were having a conversation with Strathcona Community League the other day because they're considering a system, and they noted that they have the Fringe in their venue in August that spikes up their electricity use. So that's something to consider. You want to have a look at what your use is of the hall. So if you have, you know, really intensive evening use in those summer months, it may or may not be worth it for you to sign up for something like a solar rate. So it's worth sort of having a look at that, at what your consumption trends are and doing that math. But it's a really good option to look into. Yeah, so go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to ask, Steph, if you know, my understanding with that, the one other caveat is you have to phone the utility to have them switch it both times. So it's not automatic. So if you miss out calling them in the winter, you're going to get hosed. So be careful. My other question and stuff, I don't know if you know the answer to this since you're not an energy retailer, but if you were in a situation where it was like Strathcona, where it was just 1 month, I'm wondering if you could maybe just call the retailer and be like, hey, drop us back down for August, and then call them in July and have them ramp it back.
So I recommended that to them if they were considering it, is basically sign up, because ultimately your biggest production months for solar, April is one of the best production months that a lot of systems see. April, May are amazing because we don't get a lot of cloud and rain, or limited. It's cooler, and ultimately solar produces, it's more efficient and it produces better in cooler temperatures. It actually becomes less efficient in the heat. And so April, May, June, July are really peak months. August is still pretty good, but if you're in a scenario like Strathcona is, where you're actually probably consuming a whole bunch more than you're producing, you just go back down to your regular rate in August. And then I don't think it would be even worth it to jump back up for September, right? So
yep. For some reason, I thought July was after August. I don't know what my brain is doing, but
it's okay. It's the evening. Yeah, so exactly. You just, you know, mark it on your calendar. And if you have a scenario like that, just make sure that you're remembering to call them so that you don't get a big surprise in your next bill. But it's a really good option. We'll do a couple of last quick slides, and then I'll hand it over to Mike to talk to you about the other options that you have for money. So available, these are just a bunch of resources that we have available on our website. If you want more information, if you want to totally nerd out on solar, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. So we also have a handy guide for how to choose a solar contractor. So if you just don't even know where to start, this will kind of walk you through the process and also walk you through what questions you should be asking, what you should expect from them. So, you know, if a solar installer doesn't give you a whole bunch of detail about your quote, you might want to consider, you know, checking in with somebody else. So it sort of shows you what pieces they should be providing. And then we've got the Solar Friendly Municipalities Toolkit, which includes things like Solar PV Basics. So it's a bit outdated. It was done a number of years ago, but it still gives, I mean, the technology hasn't changed that much. It gives you an idea of, you know, basics of the technology and installation. And there's a few case studies and other things available as well. So we also, this is just a high-level overview of our other programs, most of which are unfortunately at this time not available to municipalities, to community leagues. They're focused on municipalities and schools. But so the Alberta Municipal Solar Program is what we've just talked about. We also have the Municipal Energy Manager Program, a Recreation Energy Conservation Program for really big rec centers that are municipally owned. Our Solar for Schools program, which is really similar to AMSP, just focused on schools. We have an EV program for municipalities, and then we're about to roll out the Clean Energy Improvement Program. So that's just in development right now. And the city of Edmonton is going to run a pilot through this as well. They are about to pass their bylaw, I believe, in the next little while here. So it basically allows, and community leagues wouldn't be eligible for this, but it's something worth knowing for your residents.
We don't know yet. Like, do you say that because it has to be municipality stuff for the CEIP?
Yeah, so you have to, well, and actually maybe you would be, you have to pay taxes.
Well,
so I don't know if community leagues pay taxes.
So I'm not sure yet. Right now they don't, unless they like don't obey by like some sort of rules or something, and they can get dinged with a property tax bill. But I'm looking into the potential, and maybe you and I can talk about this in the future, of that there is leagues can be issued a property tax bill. So I'm wondering if they could be issued a property tax bill with only this on it.
It's definitely worth checking in with the city of Edmonton, because that would be a great option to help. It's basically a low-cost financing tool. So what it does is the property borrows the money as opposed to a person borrowing the money. So instead of going to the bank and getting a home equity line of credit or something like that to do energy efficiency improvements or renewable energy project on a residence or a commercial property, you apply to the city. Now they have to pass a bylaw that allows this to happen, and then they have to set up the program with MCCAC. So there are some steps that have to happen before it's available, but it's open to any municipality in Alberta that wants to participate, and City of Edmonton has plans to do this. So you basically apply to your municipality for the project that you want to do. They lend you the money at a low interest rate, or they lend your property the money at a low interest rate. And then you pay that amount back through your property taxes over time. So it would be similar to if you've been in a neighborhood that just had neighborhood renewal done and you choose to pay for the upgrades to your sidewalks and roads through your property taxes. Really similar. It just is an additional payment that you would make every month in addition to your property taxes. So, and the great thing about that is if you don't plan to be, now, not necessarily applicable for community leagues, but for residents and businesses in particular, if they don't plan to be in that building for, the 12 years that it's going to take to pay off a solar array, it's okay, because when they sell, that loan goes with the property. So the next person sees all of the advantages of the upgrades that have been put in place, and they continue to pay for it. So that's the Clean Energy Improvement Program in a nutshell. But that's my time, and I will see if I can get back. I'm going to stop sharing so that Mike can share. And
thank you, Steph. And we do have some.
Sorry, I think I went over time.
That's okay. We'll figure it out. I'll rush. We do have some questions in the chat that we'll run through, and then if anyone has any more questions after we get through these, just unmute yourself or type them into the chat, and we will get to those as well. So yeah, and Steph, if you just want to pass over hosting privileges to me so I can share, that'd be great. And so yeah, let me scroll through the chat here, and we'll ask questions. I think maybe some will be good for you. There might be some for me that I'll cover later, but David had asked what the second organization was. I believe that was when you had mentioned that it can't be combined with the energy savings for business. David, you can clarify if that was the case or not, if it was a question about what it could or could not be combined with in terms of that provincial program. Is that what you had been asking?
No, there was a talk about Solar Alberta and then a Canadian something.
Oh.
Yeah, the Canadian Renewable Energy Association. So it used to be, there were two organizations. There was the Canadian Solar Industry Association and the Canadian Wind Energy Association. And last year they joined. And so it's now the Canadian Renewable Energy Association.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
And then David also asked, can we get a list of those leagues to consult with? And so Steph did put that list up, and we will be sharing slides. I'll send mine, Steph. Can we share yours as well after?
You bet. Yeah, and I would happily just pull that slide out too and just send it to you in table format to email to everybody.
Well, and the other thing too is like what I can do is if you want to get in touch with some of these leagues, you're more than welcome to just reach out to me. You can email me at greenleagues@efcl.com or .org, pardon me. And I will try and put you in touch with folks who've done this. And then also, if you look on our website, the EFCL's website, we have a sustainability spotlight where we highlight a lot of these projects there. So you can see, especially Laurier Heights, Inglewood, Parkdale, Cromdale, which are the most recent three, have all been featured there in the last few months. So you can find out more about those projects there as well. Chris from Malmo has asked, building a new hall. So when does the PV system have to be installed to get funding?
Yeah, so that one, you would need to have the hall built first, would be your first step. So depending on what your construction timelines are, sometimes you can work with with the folks that are doing your construction project, and check with them to see when you could actually access the roof, because sometimes solar can go on if the interior of the building isn't totally finished, but the exterior is, and it can support the solar and all of your structure is there. You might be able to put solar on partway through the construction project. So it's a bit dependent on your other construction timelines. And as long as it's within that 8-month window of you signing your funding agreement, as long as your system is installed and energized within that time, then that would be fine. So again, you would still need to connect into your electrical system that's being built as part of that new hall. So it'll be a bit dependent on what your construction timelines of the hall are and when things are ready.
Great, thank you, Steph. And then our next question is, do you have a list of qualified installers?
So we don't. It's a little bit unlike some of the other programs. We don't have a list that we host, but we would recommend that folks go to the Solar Alberta membership directory. They have a really great list that you can actually filter out by location, and just have a look through that list, and it's got everyone's contact information on it. And then for sure that they're also a Solar Alberta member, which is one of our criteria. So have a look, and it should show how long they've been in business and how many other projects they've done and things like that as well. So that will help you self-select if you're interested in that.
We also have a Green League's list of preferred contractors, which we've vetted local contractors in Edmonton, and like the top couple on those lists have done a bunch of these community league projects. So I encourage you to check that out, or to email me, and I can send that over to you. And then we covered the league changing its energy use depending on the time of month. So we covered that, so I won't get to that. So yeah, if there's no more questions, then I will jump into my my portion here, and we can run through some of the other options for folks for funding to try and stack. So just give me 1 second. Turn on the screen. There we go. Okay, can everyone see my slide there? Does that look good? Okay, thanks, Stephanie. All right, yeah, and just a big thank you to Stephanie and the MCCAC for taking the time here tonight to chat with us this evening. Stephanie actually reached out to me to offer to present to leagues, and it's because of her that we're able to be here this evening. So thanks again, Stephanie.
You're very welcome.
Oh, that's not the right slide. All right, so I'll now run through some other potential funding sources that can be stacked with AMSP, beginning with the well-known Community League Infrastructure Program, or CLIP. While most of you are probably familiar with CLIP, I'll run through a few things in case some are less aware of the grant, as well as inform everyone of some changes to the grant due to recent cuts to the program by the city. So in terms of funding amount, okay, so this grant is the most important and guaranteed grant to stack with AMSP. So this is the one I recommend the most. It will cover 50% of the entire project cost. And the basic grant covers up to $25,000, and that can be applied for every single year by leagues. So if your system is 50,000 or under, which Steph had noted that the average cost was, I think, 48,000 for these systems, then that'll cover 50%. If it's more than that, you can do the math on whether you think it's worth using up your intermediate grant, which covers up to $100,000 every 3 years, up to 50% of project costs. So I mean, generally you'll probably be using the basic, but if it's a larger system and you think it's worth it to use your intermediate grant up, then that's an option as well. And then and also if it's you have the option to add additional work to the project, and like say if you need to do some roofing upgrades before you can install your system, which sometimes is the case, and your solar installer should be able to help you out with letting you know about that if there's structural issues. And so you can just you can add a little bit to the scope of your project if you want to take advantage of the higher grant amount. The large grant, which won't really apply to solar unless it's a new hall build, as in the case of Malmo. That is unavailable for the next 2 years due to cuts in the grant in this most recent budget cycle. So just be aware of that $400,000 large grant, like extensive one, won't be available this year or in 2022, as far as I know. The application.
Sorry, just to jump in, because there was a question very quickly, wondering whether the intermediate might be $150,000 now. Is that is the $100,000?
They may have changed it. Okay. I was going off older numbers, and I had asked someone about this, and they said the only change was that one would be offered. But if you know more, check the website. I'm sure they've updated it there, so you can take a look at the CLIP website.
Super.
Yeah, the application for CLIP opened on March 1st, and the deadline is March 31st, which, if you want to apply this year, is a very, very tight window. What does this mean in terms of trying to take advantage of the Alberta Municipal Solar Program? Well, the program requires that you already have the other funding that you need to go ahead with the project, which means you can't apply for the Alberta Municipal Solar Program unless either you've already been approved for the other grants you're going to use to fund the project, or you have the funds to pay out of pocket for that amount. So if your league has a lot of money in reserve, you can not apply for CLIP this year. You can apply for the Alberta Municipal Solar Program. That will cover, say, 30 to 40% roughly, and then you would pay the rest out of pocket, and then you can apply for CLIP retroactively next year to pay for work done in 2021. If your league does not have the funds to do that, that means you have to rush a CLIP application this year. I'll get into this more a little bit with the grant stacking section, so I'll kind of dive into this a little bit more, but just be aware that there might be very limited time to get this approved by your board. And so the turnaround time for CLIP, if you do apply this year, is, depending on whether it's fully subscribed or not, is 4 to 12 weeks. So that's how long it'll take to know whether you have CLIP. So if you apply for it right away, you'll know within a couple months, give or take, sometimes less, sometimes maybe a little more. And then once that's approved, you'll have half of the money. You get AMSP for the other 40% on the high end, and that only leaves 10% left to pay by the league, which is pretty good. And Steph tells me that AMSP, the turnaround time for hearing about that grant is pretty quick. Typically, it just depends on how long the city takes to approve everything. So it's possible that you apply for CLIP before the end of the month, and 4 months later, 90% of your system is paid for. So keep that in mind when you're chatting with your board if you decide you want to go ahead. And yeah, if you don't, sorry, Steph, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to add one thing that I realized I forgot to stress in my piece is that it is a rebate. AMSP is a rebate program. So the one thing you will have to keep in mind is your cash flow, because as part of our completion documents, we do require proof that the system has been paid for. So if you get your CLIP money up front, that's great. You will need to have reserves of some kind to pay for the rest of the system until you can get our rebate to cover the rest of it. So just so you're aware of the process there.
Thanks. So yeah, and if you don't apply for CLIP this year, again, you can either apply for AMSP and then retroactively use CLIP next year to refund what you paid out of pocket this year for that portion that AMS or that CLIP would cover, that 50%. Or you could try and hit the very short window next year if AMSP does last until the end of next April, which is the official closing date. If it runs out before then, it runs out, and you can try and keep an eye on that and chat with Steph about that. But if it does last until then, you could potentially be kind of applying for AMSP and CLIP next year, but the timelines are so narrow, and if CLIP doesn't get approved quick enough, it's pretty tough. So I would say your two good options are apply for CLIP right away and get the ball rolling like tomorrow, and I'll chat with you more about how you could do that, or pay out of pocket and then apply for CLIP retroactively to cover the cost next year. Yeah, so how to apply, in terms of how to apply, you can just visit the City of Edmonton Grants website. I'll be sharing these slides with you, so you'll have the link. Some of you probably already have that, or your treasurer should. And then what you'll just need your grant account ID, which is the same one you use for your operating grant. There's a project budget form linked here that's on the website as well. Your year-end financial statements, board minutes approving funds saved for a special purpose, and quotes for the work to be completed, which I've reached out to a couple of the local solar contractors that I recommend, and they've said they could probably do about a 1 week turnaround time for quotes if the league lets them know how urgent it is. So this is still feasible to apply this month. It's just very tight, and it's going to take some pretty concerted effort on your part dealing with getting the quotes and getting approval from the board. The other grant that is most typically used to combine for these projects is the Community Facility Enhancement Program, or CFEP. That's the provincial matching grant, which is often combined with CLIP for league infrastructure projects. Some updates on this one. CFEP was cut by about a third last year, from 38 million down to 25 million. And this I should say, this grant is for all nonprofits and charities, I believe, throughout Alberta. So it's not just community leagues that are eligible. And then my understanding is that it was just cut again recently by an additional 25% down to 18 million. So it's been slashed in half by the province recently. So it's much more competitive now. It's going to be tough to get. Hopefully they're still willing to fund these solar projects, but I wouldn't rely heavily on this. It might be worth just applying for that like 10-15% that you can't get covered with the other grants, just because if it's coming in at a lower amount, maybe it'll be worth it for the province to fund it if it's just, say, like, $10,000 to make up a full $50,000 system or something, or even 5,000. I'm not sure, but still worth applying, I think. But just don't hold your breath on it, I would say. Again, yeah, it's a matching grant, although they will fund up to $10,000 without a match. You won't have to worry about that because we have CLIP for the leagues, unless you're not using it, because you have something else you want to use your CLIP grant for. The small funding stream grants up to $125,000 at 50% of project costs, which will cover any community league system. The deadlines to apply are March 15th, September 15th, and then January 15th of next year. And then keep in mind, the website says the turnaround time for hearing back on this grant is about 6 months, much longer than both CLIP and AMSP, which you'll hear back relatively quickly. And then once you receive this grant, you have 18 months to complete the project after you receive your check. So you can just visit this is not the right link. This is for CLIP, but I'll fix that before I send it out. I'll provide the link for folks if they don't have it. So yeah, I'll now run through a few other funding sources that have been used in the past, or one that I think is a potential that I don't think has been used yet. Many of these won't work, but I thought it was worth mentioning them quickly, and they're good to know about just in case you want to pursue solar in the future if it's not going to work out this year. So Stephanie already mentioned the Co-op Community Spaces program. It could be useful if you're installing solar as part of a larger greening project that involves an outdoor space. That's kind of the main criteria. So Riverdale Solar Gazebo in the photo here is one example that might, they didn't use this grant, but that might work for this. Another could be if the solar is going up in tandem with a community garden, where the league was, say, planning to use the solar to, I don't know, power a kitchen where the gardening produce is cooked or something like that. I don't know. That's actually a very specific example that I'll get to with the next grant. So that's a thing that's happened before. But yeah, this program provides funding in the $25,000 to $125,000 range. So you can take a look at that. That's a potential in the future. This next one is the Local Food Infrastructure Fund. It's a federal grant. It was used by Parkdale-Cromdale Community League to fund about a third of the cost of their solar system that went up recently. they run a community kitchen program out of their hall, and the grant, this grant is intended to provide local food security. It includes funding for sustainable food production. So they used it for their solar and also for some upgrades in their commercial kitchen space. So again, if you have a community garden or plan to include one, maybe you could apply for this. It being federal, it's a little more stringent in who they'll give money to, and it tends to have to do with, you know, food security around groups that would typically be facing food insecurity issues. So if you're, you know, if you're out sort of in the suburb areas, depending where it is, or if you're, you know, depending where your community is located and the demographic situation, this might not work, but it did for Parkdale Cromdale. So something to keep in mind. It says it's temporarily closed though right now. So maybe in the future, again, if you're not going to do it this year, keep an eye on that. And then again, this one you can't combine with AMSP, but if you don't get to it this year, this is a potential. It provides some funding for solar, although not a ton. But it can also be put towards energy efficiency upgrades at your hall. There are a couple of caveats, however. Organizations who are eligible must not generate 50% or more of their annual revenue from public agencies. This is tough for leagues. It probably will include operating grant funding and casino fund money. And so unless you generate quite a bit of your revenue on a yearly basis from membership fees and hall rentals, which some leagues do, and with the new tripartite agreement that we're coming out with, there may be an opportunity to generate more revenue from sort of commercial activities, in which case down the road this could be a good option if it's still around. So keep it in mind. Yeah, funding will be provided per upgrade. More info can be found on the Emissions Reduction Alberta website. Eco City Edmonton, it's a grant that's been offered in the past by the City of Edmonton and Alberta Eco Trust. It's been used to fund a few of the early Community League solar projects. It's kind of in limbo at the moment while the city determines whether they have enough to fund it again this year. So while it's currently unavailable, it could be worth keeping an eye on, because they still don't know, I think, if they're going to fund it in 2021. And I was told, though, about a year or so ago that it's unlikely to fund just like a simple solar project anymore. But they may still fund it as part of a larger greening project, like a full hall retrofit that includes solar, or a move toward a net zero energy community hall. So something to check out and keep in mind and consider. Now, I'm going to review a few potential paths for stacking the three main grant streams. I've included CFAP, but the main funding sources I'm recommending here and focusing on are AMSP and CLIP, which should cover, you know, anywhere from 75 to 90% of the total cost to have the system installed. And just keep in mind, these are sample pathways only, and that every league will be unique, in a unique position. So you'll have to come up with your own plan, but these I'm going to show you to try and get you thinking about it. So in the first example, this is one if you move really quickly. Basically tomorrow, call a couple of solar contractors from my recommended contractors list that we have at the EFCL. And this is totally free. They'll come, they'll do a site assessment, and they'll provide you with quotes. And then from there, you can go to your board. You'll probably have to phone them, because if you don't have a board meeting right at that moment, you'll have to give everyone a call and try and work this out. If you can get the board to approve it for this year, so, you know, use your convincing rhetoric skills to get them on board. And then as soon as they approve it, submit an expression of interest to MCCAC for the Alberta Municipal Solar Program. That's not a commitment. It just says we're looking at doing this. And then get your CLIP application in before March 31st for 50% of the quoted price. You will hear back at the very latest by around halfway through May, or sorry, by June 30th, by the end of June. You should have received approval. CLIP almost always goes through. If it's overprescribed, I imagine the solar project will still get accepted, since the city wants to get these projects to go ahead. So you'll likely receive that 50%. You can also, before May 15th, apply for CFEP for 10 to 50% of your project cost. You might do 10 if you're thinking maybe you're more likely to get it. You might do 50 if you're like, well, might as well just try and get 50%, and then we can save some of our CLIP grant. That'll be up to you. And then once you get your CLIP grant approval, you'll have 50% paid. Talk to Stephanie, make sure there's money left in AMSP. If there is, go ahead, hire your contractor, apply for AMSP. You will receive it if there's money left, and as long as you meet all the basic criteria. And then really the only funding that the league would have to pay out of pocket at that point would be about anywhere from 10 to 20% of the system cost. So if you have that much money and you act quickly, you can make this happen this year and at very little cost to the community league. And then so before November 30th, you'd receive your CFEP approval or rejection, and you would kind of know, is it 100% paid for or is it 90% paid for? So either way, pretty good, but you'd have to act really quickly. The second path I have is for a league that has absolutely no reserve funds to put towards a project. So for this one, it would be the same thing. Rush your CLIP grant, apply for CFEP, but apply to make sure that you're going to hit that portion that AMSP and CLIP won't cover. Wait until you've been approved for both grants. Keep checking the status of AMSP to make sure that there's still money available. And then if there is, once you receive your CFEP approval, if that goes through, you can then apply for AMSP, because you'll have the rest of the portion paid for and it'll be $0 cost to the league. And you should be able to make it work. Again, you'd have to act quickly, and it would be relying on CFEP to cover that portion that AMSP and CLIP won't cover, which, given the cuts, is no guarantee. The third option would be the possibility of submitting a late CLIP grant application. This has happened in the past when CLIP has not been fully subscribed. Last year, I helped a couple of community leagues apply for CLIP, not for solar projects, but for just other infrastructure projects after the deadline. So they will do this, but if the grant is fully subscribed, then this won't be an option, so you would be gambling on that. But if you just can't get it done within March, which is very understandable, you're welcome to reach out, later on, once you can kind of get your ducks in a row, and I can reach out to the grants office for you and find out if it's unsubscribed, can we get a late application in, and you could still probably make this happen and have it be a little bit less of a rush early in the spring here. And then the rest of the process would be very similar to the other ones you've seen. It would just give you a little bit more time to get ready. And then this one would be to basically not apply for CLIP this year for this project, but to still complete the project. So you get your AMSP, potentially get CFEP, but get your AMSP and put up the rest of the money through league reserve, a pool of money that the league has reserved. And then you could apply retroactively for CLIP next year, because you can apply the following year for upgrades that you did the prior year. So you could still get it done this year, front the cost to the league, and then get it paid retroactively next year. So that is also an option. So something to consider as well. And then just quickly, other considerations for doing this. If you decide to go ahead, do you want to bring the city of Edmonton on board early if you can? So talk to your neighborhood resource coordinator. If you don't know who that is, shoot me an email and I will let you know and put you in touch with them. So they can help guide you through the city's infrastructure process and make sure you're getting that city approval that you need to get your AMSP funding, and just to do infrastructure projects in general on city-owned land. And be aware of the possibility that the city may impose a performance bonding criteria on the system, which is a new thing they're doing, and I'm trying to work with them on this. But at the moment, some leagues have had to do this. if that's the case, you need to let your installer know that this might be coming. Just flag it right away regardless, because some solar installers aren't bonded. And if they're not, and it comes up later, it's going to be an issue. So just let your installer know, like, hey, the city has done this in the past where they've made leaks get these systems performance bonded, which is basically insurance on the work done. This is totally unnecessary for this size of system and is not industry norm, but the city has made a couple leagues do this. So just be aware of that. Make sure your contractor is bonded.
And to clarify too, for AMSP, it is an eligible expense through us. We have had a community league come through our program, and it was a surprise at the end. And because it's required, we included it as an eligible expense. So it doesn't mean you'll get all of it back, but you will get some of it back through your rebate, as you know, if you're hitting that 30% cap for sure. So
great. And then another thing to note is just to make sure you pick a reputable contractor. Steph had mentioned that AMSP won't fund you if you don't. Also, the city would be concerned, and it's not that hard to do. There's tons of them out there now. We have a list. Solar Alberta has lists. Just go, reach out to Steph or I or whatever, and make sure you find someone good. One good sign too, if you're trying to figure it out, is does the contractor provide a warranty on the work done, not just the parts, which are warranted by the manufacturer, but if something goes wrong with the system because of the install, will they stand by their work and come fix it? Most will. All the reputable folks will. So keep that in mind. And then lastly, just act fast. The window for solar specific grants is shrinking. We've seen some fallout. Infrastructure grants for leagues have been cut in general recently. So if you want this to happen, I would say, now, I was going to use a colorful phrase, but kind of like now or never, or at least it's much more likely to happen or to get more of the cost funded if you do it sooner rather than later. All right, and then very, very quickly, the City of Edmonton has asked me to share some of their other programs with you folks here. So before I wrap up, I'm just going to run through a few rebate programs that they're offering through their Change for Climate office. The first is the Change Mobility for Climate rebate. The city is offering an EV charger program, which aims to increase EV adoption in Edmonton by providing financial incentives for purchasing and installing EV charging stations. The rebate provides up to 50% of the cost of installing a charger, up to a maximum of $600 for homeowners and $2,000 for commercial properties. The latter group can apply for up to 5 chargers, so that would be community leagues could do this. The city's vision is to see residents taking public transit and engaging in active transportation like walking and cycling. That's mine as well, and EFCL's as well. And then replacing the remaining trips that they need with car share or with electric vehicles instead of internal combustion engine vehicles. And having a reliable network of EV charging stations in public spaces, homes, and workplaces is really essential for the adoption of EVs. And so, especially if you put up solar, then during when the sun's up, that electricity is coming in for free anyway, and you could have folks coming by and charging their vehicles. I'm guessing you can also set it up to charge people. I don't know if that really will make sense in the community league context, but could be a potential revenue generation source. I don't know. But keep it in mind, 50% would be covered. On the residential side, the city has some residential rebate programs that they'd like me to share with you and for you guys to consider and also potentially share with your members. The first and newest, the newest one that's come out is the HERA program, or the Home Energy Retrofit Accelerator program. It's intended to increase the adoption of energy retrofit technologies in residential homes. It offers rebates on various energy conservation measures to be implemented in the homes of residents in Edmonton. Information about how to take advantage of that program is on the slide here. More can be found by visiting the city's Change for Climate website. I'm not going to read this or run through it because I don't have time. I will send that stuff out though. The city is also offering a solar rebate for residential homeowners. The rebate covers about 15% of the cost to install solar on your home. Pays for 40 cents per installed watt, not as good as the $1 per watt you'll get from AMSP with your league, unfortunately, but It's not nothing. Limit is up to $4,000 per home, or 40% of the total cost, which if 40 cents per watt covered 40% of your cost, you've got a pretty good deal from your installer, I'd say. Maybe they're anticipating costs really dropping quickly. I don't know. But yeah, you can visit the Change for Climate website, or just Google like Edmonton residential solar rebate for more information on that. And then just last of all, we have some upcoming events offered by Green Leagues and the EFCL. We're planning to hold a low carbon transportation workshop near the beginning of summer, sort of after Leagues Alive wraps up, which we're aiming for early June for that. So maybe late June-ish for this one. And then also you can expect to see our 2021 edition of Green League's Energy 101 workshop series. That the advertising will start this summer, and I'm aiming to hold those maybe late summer, early fall. So thank you all for coming. I know that was very quick. I kind of had to rush a little bit, but I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have. So you can feel free to unmute yourself at the bottom left corner, or otherwise I'll check the chat and you can type any other questions you might have in there.
I don't think there's anything at the moment, but.
Okay, I saw like a bunch of stuff popping up. So
yeah, we were just sharing links.
Okay, great. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in there. Yeah, I mean, I also just like, if you do want to do this and you want to act quickly, send me an email or give me a phone call tomorrow or whenever you have the chance, and I will help walk you through it. It sounds intimidating, but like the vast majority, well, not the vast majority, the majority of the work will be done by your contractor. They will even often apply for grants for you. Like typically they'll apply for AMSP and you won't even have to do that. You just need to think about timing the grants out, which I've tried to get you thinking about. Really, it's just a matter of like, get the quotes, get your board to approve the idea, and then apply for CLIP and see if you get it. And then at that point, you've got half the cost paid for, and you can move forward with applying for your AMSP and hiring your contractor. And so, I mean, it's certainly doable. Normally I wouldn't try and recommend rushing it so much. It's just that with AMSP running out as quickly as it is, you know, if you were to wait a year, you're probably going to miss the boat. And so, yeah, it is what it is. You know, we would have liked to get this information out a little sooner. I've kind of been pushing the solar program regularly, the AMSP, and I was sending off warning bells last year about it, but it looks like they've officially picked a date when it's going to close now. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of the last shot for this. That doesn't mean there won't be more programs in the future, though. We don't know what's coming federally. You know, who knows, maybe the city will figure out a way to provide some funding, although I wouldn't hold my breath anytime soon, given where they're at right now. But
yeah, and like Mike said earlier too, I mean, it's if this is too quick, and that's totally fair, and you want to try and do something for next year, just be in touch with me. I'm happy to let you know if we've still got funding available. You know, if it gets to be January, February next year and you want to start thinking about putting your CLIP funding in, give me a call, send me an email, and I'll let you know what AMSP is looking like and whether I can sort of estimate whether, you know, hopefully there'll be still funding available till that end of April deadline of 2022. We may still have funding, and because it's a first come first served program, it's just really hard to estimate if and when we'll be fully subscribed, or if we'll go all the way to that end of April deadline of next year.
yeah, and you know, if that is the case, you can also, like, even though CLIP typically takes anywhere from sort of like 2 weeks to, if it's fully subscribed, up to a few months. If you're in the situation where you really want to make this happen, and you apply for CLIP next March, and you want to hear back sooner because you are trying to get confirmation so that you can apply for the grant through MCCAC, please just like keep the EFCL in the loop as well, and we can work with you and with the grants office to try and make that happen. technically the CLIP grant is actually the EFCL's grant that we're giving to you. It comes initially from the city. They give it to us to grant out, but then because we don't have the capacity to do that, they do it. So we never actually see it, but technically, legally speaking, it's our money that they gave us to give to you. So they will work with us on trying to make it work, and these projects are important to us, and they should be important to the city as well, given their mandates. So, you know, I would advise, if there's one piece of advice, it's really don't hesitate to reach out, phone me, phone Stephanie, send us an email, because often people don't want to do that, but one-on-one conversations can really help. And I'm happy to come chat with your board. I think I asked Stephanie if the MCCAC would be willing to come give a presentation to a board. She assured me they would. And so, yeah, I mean, just keep all that in mind. If it's something that you really want to make happen, I think, you know, there's ways we can work with you to try our best to see that it does. So yeah, I mean, I guess if there's no questions, with that said, I'll just close us out here by saying, you know, thank you everyone who attended this evening. I hope the information that we provided will come in handy, and I'd love it if some more leagues could manage to take advantage of this program before it closes. I'll be posting the recording and slides for this presentation on our website, and I'll be sending out a PDF of the slide decks along with recordings to everyone who signed up for the event. You will also receive a Google form to fill out for feedback for this session. I know those can be annoying, and you've probably filled out a million of them, but it is really beneficial for us if you can spare just like 2 minutes to fill it out, just so we know how we're doing and how we can improve things for next time. And yeah, just again, a huge thank you to this evening's guest presenter, Stephanie Ripley, for sharing her time and expertise with us, and to you, EFCL member participants. We hope to see you again, and have a wonderful night.
Yeah, thanks for having me and for spending your Wednesday night with us.
Yeah, thanks guys. Take care, and yeah, don't be shy. Feel free to reach out.
Take care, everybody.
Whew.
I'm so sorry. I looked at the clock and I was like, oh my God.